Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We continue reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 11, Text 6. We are hearing the instructions that Jaḍa is giving to Maharaj Rahūgaṇa. Dukkam sukham yatikirtam chativram.
Dukkam sukham vitam chativram.
Kalopapanam phalam avyanakti.
Kalopapunyam phalam avyanakti.
Alingyamaya rachitantraratma.
Alingyamaya rachitant atma.
Swadehinam samshriti chakrakuttaha.
Swadehinam samsriti chakrakutaha.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The materialistic mind covering the living entity soul carries it to different species of life. This is called continued material existence. Due to the mind, the living entity suffers or enjoys material distress and happiness. Being thus illusioned, the mind further creates pious and impious activities and their karma, and the soul becomes conditioned. Mental activities under the influence of material nature cause happiness and distress within the material world. Being covered by illusion, the living entity eternally continues conditioned life under different designations. So we are the spirit soul. We are spirit soul. We have nothing to do with this material world actually. But now because we are thinking we are the body, we are identifying ourselves with our body, with our mind. We have given the control of our consciousness to the mind. So then the mind makes us think, oh, this is a suitable position, so this is happiness. Oh, this is not good, so this is unhappiness. So, but it's all material actually, and we are identifying with it. So how powerful our mind is actually. That because of our mind, we are being here in the material world since so many millions and millions of births. That's what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, engage your mind in always thinking of me. Whereas our mind is always thinking, let me do this, so I will be happy. Let me avoid this, so that I don't suffer in the material world. How can I be happy in the material world? How can I avoid suffering in the material world? This is what the mind is always telling us. Whereas Krishna and here Jaḍa is saying we need to rise above the mind, control the mind. Not easy, no? But something that we have to work on because they are telling us that we have to do it, we have to control it. Such living entities are known as Nitya Baddha, eternally conditioned. On the whole, the mind is the cause of conditioned life. Therefore, the entire yogic process is meant to control the mind and the senses. So here, the mind is what is keeping us here in the material world. So control of mind and senses, that is the prerequisite for any of the process for self-realization. It could be bhakti or yoga, dhyan yoga, or even gyan yoga. First thing the yogi does is control the mind and the senses. So it's important, and that's something we actively have to try to do it. If the mind is controlled, the senses are automatically controlled, and therefore the soul is saved from the reactions of pious and impious activity. If the mind is engaged at the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, Savai Mana Krishna Padara Vindayo, the senses are automatically engaged in the Lord's service. So it means fixing the mind on Krishna. remembering Krishna. Krishna is also saying, engage your mind in thinking of me. Whereas we are thinking, at least I can just speak about myself, of everything else except Krishna, even while chanting or while offering prayers. Oh, I have to do this, I have to do that. So, something that we really have to think about, that the mind needs training. And because of the mind, we are continuing our conditional life. It's making us be here in the material world. When the mind and senses are engaged in devotional service, the living entity naturally becomes Krishna conscious. So the mind also has to be involved when we are engaging in devotional service. As soon as one always thinks of Krishna, he becomes a perfect yogi, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, yoginam api sarvesham mad gatenantaratmana. So does anyone know which chapter is this verse coming from? Yoginam api sarvesham mad gatenantaratmana. It's from Bhagavad Gita.
I think it's chapter number 11 or no, 7.
Close, very close, very close. It's in chapter 6, the last verse.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
very
because
close.
because he's telling, and in 7th he begins. Okay, yes. Sorry.
Yeah, because 7th he starts giving information about bhakti and about himself. And so 6th chapter is the Dhyan Yoga, no? All about the yoga. So he's saying the best yogi is one who is always thinking of me. This antaratma, the mind, is conditioned by material nature. As stated here, Maya rachitantaratma swadehinam samsriti chakra kutaha. The mind, being most powerful, covers the living entity and puts him in the waves of material existence. So, how powerful this mind is that we have. That's what's keeping us here in the material world. And Krishna is saying, control your mind, think of me. Here, Bharata is saying, think of Krishna, control your mind. We also heard in the story of Puranjana that how the mind is what is creating different bodies in the material world. So we need to engage the mind in devotional service. So it's a really powerful tool, So that's something that we need to work on, control the mind, to train it to remember Krishna. It needs training. That's why we are being informed of it. Text 7. Tavan ayam vyavahara sadavi.
Tavan ayam vyavhar sadavi
Kshetragya sakshyo bhavati sthula sukshma.
kshetragya saksho bhavati sthula sukshmaha
Tasman manolingam adovat tasman manolingam adoba vadanti.
tasmad manolingam advatanti
Guna gunat gunatavasya para varasya.
guna aguna tavasya para aparasya.
Mind makes the living entity within this material world wander through different species of life, and thus the living entity experiences mundane affairs in different forms as a human being, demigod, fat person, skinny person, and so forth. Learned scholars say that bodily appearance, bondage, and liberation are caused by the mind. Just as the mind is the cause of bondage, it can also be the cause of liberation. So it's a tool, just like knife is a tool. In the hands of a wrong person, it can do harm, but in hand of a surgeon, it can save lives. So the mind is described here as para avara. Para means transcendental and avara means material. When the mind is engaged in the Lord's service, Savai Mana Krishna Padaravindayo, it is called para, transcendental. When the mind is engaged in material sense gratification, it is called avara or material. So what is the mind described here as? The two
Para and
terms?
apara. The para
Yeah.
and the avara.
And what do they mean?
Para means divya, transcendental, and spiritual, and avara means material.
Yeah. And so what here we are learning that the mind can be cause of what?
Mind can be cause of your material bondage and also the cause of the liberation that we can get.
Yeah. So it's so powerful, the
Yeah.
mind. I mean, something to think about, no? What are we always thinking of? Krishna is saying, think
Desire.
of me. And then our mind is saying, no, 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 I have something else
Hmm.
to think about. So that's some work that needs to be done on our part. Okay. At the present moment, in our conditioned state, our mind is fully absorbed in material sense gratification. But it can be purified and brought to its original Krishna consciousness. How? By the process of devotional service. So, right now, of course, we have material desires, we want to enjoy with our senses, enjoy the body. But if we engage in devotional service, we will be able to purify the mind and bring it to the original consciousness, which is Krishna consciousness. We have often given the example of Ambarish Maharaj, Savai Mana Krishna Padaravindayor, Vachamsi Vaikuntha Gunanuvarnane. Ambarish Maharaj. The mind must be controlled in Krishna consciousness. So the mind, there may be other methods of controlling the mind, like some people may try to control it with some kind of exercise, with some willpower and all that. But if we want a permanent solution, because that may last for a certain time or under certain circumstances, but there may be certain circumstances which might not, we may not be able to control the mind. So the real way to do it is engaging in devotional service. The tongue can be utilized to spread the message of Krishna and glorify the Lord, or take prasad, the remnants of food offered to Krishna. Sevon mukhehi jivado. When one utilizes the tongue in the service of the Lord, the other senses can become purified. So devotional service begins with the tongue. Tongue is most difficult sense to control. So tongue to chant the holy name, to chant the glories of Krishna, and to taste Krishna Prasad. And in this way, the other senses can be controlled. As stated in the Narad Pancharatra, Sarvapadi Vinirmuktam Tat Paratvena Nirmalam. So when the mind and senses are purified, one's total existence is purified and one's designations are also purified. So Narad Pancharatra states, Sarvapadi Vinirmuktam Tat Paratvena Nirmalam. By engaging in devotional service, the mind and senses become pure. And then one can give up this material designations. I'm a human being, and I'm a man or a woman or this community or this society or this country. All these are designations which we need to give up, because our real designation is we are eternal servant of Krishna. We are part and parcel of Krishna. Jivera Swarupai Krishna Nityadas, Lord Chaitanya says. We have a loving relationship with Krishna. That is our real designation. But we have made so many other designations based on the body. And our entire existence goes in in defending those designations, or, acting in terms of those designations. One no longer considers himself a human being, a demigod, cat, dog, Hindu, Muslim, and so forth. When the senses and mind are purified and one is fully engaged in Krishna's service, one can be liberated and return home back to Godhead. So we have to rise above this. I'm a Hindu or a Muslim or a cat or a dog or a demigod or a human being, and understand that I'm a spirit soul, part and parcel of Krishna. I'm a servant of Krishna. Then one can go back home, back to Godhead. That is liberation. When we can give up our material designations, that is liberation. Means we've understood we are not the body, we are the soul. So the mind and senses need to be controlled to be able to do that, need to be purified to be able to do that. So the more we can engage in devotional service, the more we can purify the mind and senses. Did anyone want to add anything?
I remember we also read that to control the mind, you need to provide it with the intelligence. So like
Yes.
right, to like you have to read the shastras, and then when that intelligence means the shastras, the knowledge from the shastras, that
Yes.
because if the mind will know that how to engage, then you can control your mind. Because if you are right, if I'm not wrong, we
Yes.
read this before, right?
Yes. Yes. That's right. Thank you. Yes. Control the mind with intelligence. That's right. So the intelligence, how we can purify it, as you rightly said, study the Shastras. Very good. Engage in devotional service. So when we engage in devotional service, our intelligence gets purified. As we read in Puranjana's story, right now our intelligence is how I can enjoy this world. That's all our intelligence is telling us. How I can enjoy this world, how I can avoid the suffering, how I can defend myself. But when we can purify our intelligence, as you said now, by reading the Shastras, by engaging in devotional service, then with the purified intelligence, we will be able to control the mind. And when the mind is controlled, the senses can be controlled. Yeah, so applying intelligence. Thank you. Very good. Thank you. The intelligence. No, the mind may tell us, oh, yes, let's do this, let's do this. But then with the higher intelligence, no, the result will not be good. Temporarily I'll be happy, but in the long term, it's not a good situation. So let me not do it. Intelligence we need in everything, no? So intelligence also to need to apply in spiritual life. Anything else?
Because I remember sometime
Yes.
when you have to wake up in the morning, the mind says 5 minutes or so ja. Kya ja raha hai? 5 minutes. Sirf 5 more minutes. And then that 5 more minutes turns into 1 hour or half an hour. You don't even know.
It's so true.
But
It's
then if
really,
you have the
really.
knowledge, then you have to tell mind that no, please. If I'm not going to wake up now, then I'm not going to wake up only. Because it's really
Oh, yeah.
difficult. Sometimes it's very easy, but it is not that easy. It is
Oh,
very, like we have to give that intelligence to mind. And if we don't have that intelligence, how are we going to tell mind?
it's so true. I tell you, my personal struggle also is really my personal struggle. I can totally relate to that.
So
5 minutes, yeah.
yeah.
Becomes, I don't know how long with that 5 minutes. Really, so true.
And that's why we say Bhagavatam as the science of knowledge. If we don't do this, this happens. We have to understand the science of it. Yeah. That's the intelligence.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Yeah, it's a science. Yes. You do this, you will get this result. You don't do this, you will get this result. Yeah. Okay. So going on to text 8. Guna anuraktam vyavasanaya janto
Guna anuraktam vyavasanaya jantam
shemaya nirgun yamato manasya
Shemaya nirgunyam atho manasya
yatha pradipo grihata varitim ashnan
Yatha pradipo dhrituparnam
shikha saduma bhajati anyata swam
Shikha saduma bhajati anyatad swam
padam tatha guna karma nubantam
Padam tatha guna karmanubandham
yatid manashrayate nyatra tattvam.
vritti manashrayate anyatra tattvam.
When the living entity's mind becomes absorbed in the sense gratification of the material world, it brings about his conditioned life and suffering within the material situation. However, when the mind becomes unattached to material enjoyment, it becomes the cause of liberation. When the flame in a lamp burns the wick improperly, the lamp is blackened. But when the lamp is filled with ghee and is burning properly, there is bright illumination. Similarly, when the mind is absorbed in material sense gratification, it causes suffering. And when detached from material sense gratification, it brings about the original brightness of Krishna consciousness. It is therefore concluded that the mind is the cause of material existence and liberation also. Everyone is suffering in this material world because of the mind. It is therefore proper to train the mind or to cleanse the mind from material attachment and engage it fully in the Lord's service. So, this is what we have to do. We are suffering because of our mind. Our mind is so absorbed in the material world. We are perceiving the material world through our mind. It's like, when we see a horror movie, we get so terrified, isn't it? A scary movie, or. So like that, through the mind, we are watching this world and we are getting terrified. So the suffering. So we need to clean the mind, means clean our consciousness, or train the mind, or to remove the mind from material attachment. How to remove the mind from material attachment? Engage it in devotional service. Automatically, because the mind can't do two things at one time. So, like when a child is naughty, you give him a toy so he can keep quiet. So, the mind, the more we will give it devotional activities to do, then the more it can refrain from the material activities, from its mischief. So this is called spiritual engagement, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 14:26. Mamcha yo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatitya brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down in any circumstance, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. So the pure devotee is liberated. because with his body, mind, and senses, words, he is engaging in service of Krishna. So he is above the modes. He's understood. He is Brahman, Aham Brahmasmi. So he is liberated. We should engage the mind fully in Krishna conscious activities, then it will be the cause of our liberation, for our returning home back to Godhead. However, if we keep the mind engaged in material activities for sense gratification, it will cause continuous bondage and will make us remain in this material world in different bodies, suffering the consequences of our different actions. So the situation of our mind that is what Bharata is saying, to control the mind, engage it in devotional service, so that the mind can help us to get out of this material world of birth and death. And the more our mind is absorbed in material activities, the more we are creating more and more bodies for us in this material world. Seems easy, not so easy, because we have had this mind since time immemorial. We have given up our physical bodies, but the mind we've never given up, no? That's the part of the subtle body. So it's been with us since, like, eternal kind of, right? Eternally it's with us because we are here in the material world. But everything has a beginning. Everything has a beginning. So now we are learning that we need to train the mind. Is that okay?
Yes.
As you just pointed out, train the mind with intelligence.
And there was one of the more other lectures where they also mentioned that we are trained to have a viewpoint in everything, no matter what. If it is not even concerned with us, we still have a viewpoint on it. So he mentioned that slowly and gradually, when you're when you are doing bhakti, then you don't have to uselessly have a viewpoint for everything.
It's so true.
You don't have to. It is not concerned with you. You are in a rush to catch your elevator for bhakti.
Yeah,
So
so true.
you don't have to sometimes, because it's not even concerned with us, and we jump into the argument, and then we don't know how many, like as we said, that we are tying the knots with that. हम कितने कर्मों में बंधते जाएंगे वो जवाब दे के यूजलेसली, मतलब हमारा कुछ लेना नहीं है, कुछ देना नहीं है उससे,
It's true.
सिर्फ
And
ये
like
दिखाने को कि मेरी कितनी नॉलेज है.
yeah, so true. And recently I was thinking about that. And sometimes, it may be we get so engrossed in outside things. Why? Because it's so difficult to control our own mind. It's so difficult to control our own senses. So we think, okay, I can try to tell others, give others this kind of my advice. Everyone should follow my advice. Because we don't want to look inside, because we know it's so difficult to control our mind and senses. So that's why we try to get involved in other things. Actually, as you said, no, we should look inside. And what am I doing? Everyone is an individual. They are doing whatever they need to do. What am I doing? So everyone is an individual. They have their own desires. They are in their own process of consciousness, evolution of consciousness. So we need not have an opinion, because after all, it's their own desire, just as we have our own desires. We have so many desires. Imagine if somebody kept on giving their opinion on us. How would we feel?
Yes,
Yeah,
this
it's
is
so
very,
true.
very important to progress. Otherwise, we
Yeah,
will be stuck in that only. And I
yeah,
think Kartik is a beautiful month to do that. We can just let go sometimes few things, because even I have that habit of interfering in so many things, but I'm making a point that there is no need.
Yeah,
Like,
so true.
just to mind my own business is good sometimes. It's not good, it's good not to
Yeah,
uselessly, because I'm not because I'm tying again knots with that person if I'm doing that.
yeah. So what helps also, like, what at least I can just share what helps me is trying to understand that everyone is an individual. Just as
Hmm.
I'm an individual, everyone is
Hmm.
an individual. So they have their own way of doing things, own likes, own
Hmm.
dislikes, just as
Hmm.
we may have our own likes, dislikes, our way of doing things. So what can you say? Because everyone is individual then, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, so true. Text 9. एकादशासन् मनसो हि
एकादश आसन
मनसो
मनसो निवृत्य
वित्तया
आकृत्य पञ्चद्योभिमानः
आकूत्य
पंच
पञ्चद्य
पंचभिमानः
मात्राणि कर्माणि पुरं च तासाम्
मात्राणि
मात्राणि
कर्माणि पुरं
कर्माणि
च तासाम्
वदन्ति हैकादशवीरभूमि
वदन्ति हैकादश
एकादश
वीरभूमि
There are 5 working senses and 5 knowledge acquiring senses. There is also the false ego. In this way, there are 11 items for the mind's functions: 5 working, 5 knowledge acquiring, and false ego. O hero, the objects of the senses, such as sound and touch, the organic activities, such as evacuation, and the different types of bodies, society, friendship, and personality, are considered by learned scholars the field of activity for the functions of the mind. Okay, the mind is the controller of the 5 knowledge acquiring senses and the 5 working senses. So the mind is called the king of senses, no? Because it controls the senses. Each sense has its particular field of activity. In all cases, the mind is the controller or owner. The mind says, oh, eat this, you will enjoy. See this, you will enjoy. Hear this, you will enjoy. That's what the mind is telling us always. Don't do this, you will suffer. By the false ego, one thinks oneself the body and thinks in terms of my body, my house, my family, my society, my nation, and so on. So, me and mine is because of the false ego. These false identifications are due to the expansions of the false ego. Thus, one thinks that he is this or that. Thus, the living entity becomes entangled in material existence. So, with our false ego, we are thinking we are the body, and everything with the body is mine. And with the mind, we are trying to enjoy this body and the material world. Gandhakriti sparsha rasa shravamsi
गंध आकृति
गन्धाकृति
स्पर्श
स्पर्श रस
रसवांसी
स्वांसि
visargarati arti abhijal pashilpaha
विसर्गरति
विसर्गति
अर्ति अभिजल्प शिल्पा
ekadasham swikaranam mameti
एकादशं
एकादशं स्वीकरणं
स्वीकरणमहं
ममेति
shayam aham dvadasham eka ahu.
शयाम अहम द्वादशमेकाम्
Sound, touch, form, taste, and smell are the objects of the 5 knowledge-acquiring senses. Speech, touch, movement, evacuation, and sexual intercourse are the objects of the working senses. Besides this, there is another conception by which one thinks, this is my body, this is my society, this is my family, this is my nation, and so forth. This 11th function of the mind is called the false ego. According to some philosophers, this is the 12th function, and its field of activity is the body. There are different objects for the 11 items. Through the nose, we can smell, by the eyes, we can see, by the ears, we can hear, and this way we gather knowledge. Similarly, they are the karmendriyas, the working senses, the hands, legs, genitals, rectum, mouth, and so forth. When the false ego expands, it makes one think, this is my body, family, society, country, etc. So basically, the sense and the sense objects. The sense objects, as we say, for the eyes, it is the form. And for the nose, it's the smell, the fragrance. For ears, the sound. So knowledge acquiring and working senses, hands, legs, genital, rectum, mouth. So that is speech, touch, movement, evacuation, and sexual intercourse. Those are for the working senses. And then with the false ego, we are thinking my society, my body, my family. So this is expansion of the false ego. That's why it's being called 11th function of the mind is called false ego. So it's just the expansion of the false ego. It's by the false ego that we are thinking I'm the body. And everything connected with the body is mind. Is that okay?
Yes.
So 11:11. Dravya svabhava karma kalir.
द्रव्य स्वभाव आशय कर्म काले
Ekadashami manaso vikaraha.
एकादशा अमी मनसो विकारः
Sahasrashashatashakotishascha.
सहस्रशतशकोटिशश्च
Kshetra gyato na mitho na swatasyo.
क्षेत्रज्ञतो न मिथुना स्वतोऽस्यु.
Physical elements, nature, the original cause, culture, destiny, and the time element are all material causes. Agitated by these material causes, the 11 functions transform into hundreds of functions, and then into thousands, and then into millions. But all these transformations do not take place automatically by mutual combination. Rather, they are under the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One should not think that all the interactions of the physical elements, gross and subtle, that cause the transformation of mind and consciousness are working independently. They are working under the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So here, Bharat is saying, of course, the physical elements are there. The earth, water, air, fire. The time element is there, destiny is there, culture, the cause of what we are doing, the desire. So all these things are there. And then they just expand and expand. Our activities goes on expanding and expanding. And everything is happening under the direction of the Supreme Lord. So in Bhagavad Gita 15.15, Krishna says that Lord is situated in everyone's heart. Sarvasya chaham hridi sanivishto matasmritir jnanam apohanam cha. As mentioned here in Super Soul, Kshetragya is directing everything. The living entity is also Kshetragya, but the supreme Kshetragya is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we are Kshetragya because we understand what's happening inside our body. We cannot know what's happening in anyone else's body. But because Krishna, as Paramatma, is in everyone's body, he can understand what's happening in everyone's body. That's why he's called the Supreme Kshetragya. He is the witness and order giver. Under his direction, everything takes place. The different inclinations of the living entity are created by his own nature or his expectations as he's trained by the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the agency of material nature. So Krishna, he does not interfere with our desire. He just facilitates the fulfillment of our desire. You know, child tells the father, I want this, I want that, I want this. And then whatever is our desire, it's being fulfilled by the agency of material nature, by the facility of the material nature, because we want to enjoy the material nature. That's our desire. Of course, Krishna wants us to come back home, just as any father wants the child to come back home. But because our desire is so strong, so he's like, okay, you play here, but at the same time, you will understand that this is not the place that is actually meant for us, you know, that we need to go back home, back to Godhead. So it's our strong desire. The body, nature, and the physical elements are under the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They do not function automatically. So the body is part of the material world. Nature, the modes, physical elements, everything is under the control of Supreme Lord. They do not function automatically. Nature is neither independent nor automatic. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is behind nature. Mayadhyakshena prakritihi suyate sacharacharam hetunanena kaunteya jagat viparivartate. This material nature is working under my direction, O son of Kunti, and is producing all moving and unmoving beings. By its rule, this manifestation is created and annihilated again and again. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, text 10. So the material world belongs to Krishna, material nature belongs to him, this body belongs to him, the elements belong to him. So, because it belongs to him, he's the controller. You know, suppose we say the house belongs to me, so we control what's happening inside the house. We cannot go and tell the owner, the neighbor, oh, I'm going to do this in your house and I'm going to do that in your house. The neighbor will say, for what? It's my house. You can't control it. So everything actually belongs to Krishna. This material world that we are in belongs to Krishna, working under his direction. We just have a very, very strong desire to be here. That's why we continue to be here. But by giving us this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and Krishna keeps reminding us that come home. This is not your permanent home, you know. Come back home. Kshetragya eta manaso vibhutir.
Kshetragya eta manaso vibhuti.
Jivasya maya rachitasya nitya.
Jivasya maya
रचितस्य
rachitya
नित्या
Avirhitakvapi tirohitascha.
avirhita vyapitirohitasya
Shuddho vichaste hi avishuddha kartuho.
shuddho
विचस्ते
vichate
अविशुद्ध कर्तुः.
The individual soul bereft of Krishna consciousness has many ideas and activities created in the mind by the external energy. They have been existing from time immemorial. Sometimes they are manifest in the awakening state and in the dream state. But during deep sleep, unconsciousness, or trance, they disappear. A person who's liberated in this life, Jivan Mukta, can see all these things vividly. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 13.3, Kshetragyam chapi mam vidhi sarva kshetreshu Bharata. There are two kinds of Kshetragya or living beings. One is the individual living being and the other is the supreme living being. The ordinary living being knows about his body to some extent, but the Supreme Paramatma knows the condition of all bodies. So how many kinds of Kshetragya are there?
2.
And who
There
are
are
they?
2. One is the living being, and the other is the supreme living being.
Yeah. One is the individual living being, we are the individual soul, and one is a supreme living being, the super soul. Yes.
Yeah.
So the ordinary living being knows about his body to some extent, but the Supreme Paramatma knows the condition of all bodies. This is the difference between our Atma and Paramatma. Why we are not the Paramatma? Because we don't know what's happening in other bodies. Paramatma knows. We can know
It's
only
the
what's
same as
happening
the
inside
para
our
and
own.
avara, right? Sorry.
Huh?
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Is it the same as the para and avara? That's what we read earlier, right?
That was for the soul, the
So,
enjoying soul and
para,
the soul in the material world.
material world. That was a para and avara, right?
So what's that in
Uh,
relation with the, let's see.
this.
Okay. 5,
I think it was
11.
just one verse before.
Or just the one before that?
One
That
before.
was for the mind.
That's for the mind.
That was for the mind.
Okay.
Yeah, the
It
mind
was
when it
Para
is in
and
those.
that's
avara.
para
Yeah.
and up. Okay. Right. Sorry. Yeah, I got
Yeah, no,
confused.
that's all right. Okay. So that's clarified then. So when the mind is absorbed in material and when the mind is absorbed in transcendental things, that was the difference.
Okay.
Yeah. So then the individual living being is localized and the Supreme Paramatma is all pervading. You know, we are inside our own body only. We are not in each other's bodies also. You are in your own body, she is in her own body, like that. But the Paramatma, everyone's body. So that's a difference. We are individual. Paramatma is all pervading. In this shlok, the word Kshetragya refers to an ordinary living being, not the supreme living being. This ordinary living being is of two kinds, Nityabada or Nityamukta. So what is Nityabada?
We are the Nityabaddhas.
What does it
The
mean?
one who are bounded by the material. Eternally they are conditioned.
Yes.
We are the
And the
conditioned soul
Nityamukta.
eternally.
Yeah.
The
And
Nityamuktas are the liberated, the eternally liberated.
and where do the Nityamukta live?
In the
The
spiritual
Vaikuntha.
world. In the spiritual world, yeah.
Yeah. And they never fall into the material world.
Yeah.
So even if the
Never.
Nityamukta sometimes may visit the material world to give us knowledge, but they are still liberated. They don't become conditioned by the modes. That's something we have to understand. Because Krishna sends his devotees, no?
Yeah.
To bring us out of the spiritual, material world. So even when the Nitya Mukta, they come to the spiritual world, it's not they have come because of some karma or anything. They come as a special service to Krishna. So then those in the material world, conditioned souls, Nitya Bada.
So can we
So
understand it like that? That because they are the eternally liberated, so they cannot be conditioned. Like, they cannot have any karma cycle with them so that they come because of that. They come to
that's
deliver
right.
us, right?
That's
We
right.
can understand in that
Yes.
way.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So
They
what
are the
will
pure-
happen to us? Huh?
They are the pure
I'm sorry.
devotees. They are the
Pure
pure
devotees.
devotees.
That's right. So even they may be roaming this earth, but they are still liberated, Jivan Mukta.
Yeah.
So what will happen to us when we are conditioned now, but once we go to the spiritual world,
We also
then
become
we still remain Nitya
the-
Bada, or what happens?
Nitya Mukta,
No
right?
mukta. We
Yes.
can go there only if we become nitya
If we are
mukta.
Nitya Mukta.
Then we become
Yes.
Nitya Mukta. That's right.
Yeah. Otherwise we cannot go.
That's-
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So the Nitya Mukta is one who is serving Krishna with body, mind, and soul. So then now, in the material world, we are conditioned souls, Nitya Bada. The Nitya Badas can become liberated by controlling the mind, because the cause of conditioned life is the mind. So if we want to join the other team, the Nitya Mukta team, we have to control our mind. When the mind is trained and the soul is not under the mind's control, the soul can be liberated even in this material world. When it is liberated, one is called Jivan Mukta. So over here can be, then when the mind is controlled, then that soul, he's engaging with his body, mind, and words in the service of Krishna. So he's a Jivan Mukta. He's liberated. A Jivan Mukta knows how he has become conditioned, therefore he tries to purify himself and return home back to Godhead. The eternally conditioned soul is eternally conditioned because he's controlled by the mind. You see, actually we are the soul, so we are superior. We are the superior energy of Krishna. But what has happened is we are letting the mind control us. We are supposed to be holding the steering wheel, but we are letting the car drive by itself. The conditioned state and liberated state are compared to the sleeping, unconscious state and the awakened state. Those who are sleeping and unconscious are eternally conditioned, but those who are awake understand that they are eternally part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna. Therefore, even in this material world, they engage in Krishna's service. So this is the pure devotee. He is understood, he is part and parcel of Krishna, so he engages in Krishna's service. As confirmed by Srila Rupa Goswami, Iha yasya harer dasye. If one takes to Krishna's service, he is liberated, even though he appears to be a conditioned soul within the material world. Because he's engaged in Krishna's service means he's understood his position, that he's not the body, he's the soul. So he's not in control of his mind. Jivan Mukta sa uchyate. In any condition, one is to be considered liberated if his only business is to serve Krishna. So, taking to Krishna's service. So this is liberation, to engage in service of Krishna. This is mukti, this is moksha. Engage in Krishna's service. Mukti, no, liberating. Service to Krishna. So we'll stop here. Did anyone want to add anything else? Okay. Thank you so much for listening and joining in. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki